Okay, look, we're past the tree.
Okay. And then we've got a gate up here.
Yeah, gate's open, we're fine.
This is the sound of Nina and I back in the car on the trail of Frank Abbott.
Well, I'm not 100% this car will get to the gate.
And this is the sound of us hitting an obstacle. Or in this case, a series of obstacles. Big, rough bumps and rocks in the dirt road.
It's definitely not a way anyone goes regularly.
No, it's not, no.
Though calling it a road is probably overstating it.
No one has come out and screamed at us to get off their property, so we're probably not on someone's property.
Well, I also think that's because no one lives here. Oh,
That didn't sound good.
To fully appreciate the situation Nina and I are now in, it helps to know that the car we're driving is almost brand new.
Very high grass here that we're driving through.
The car also belongs to our employers.
We're going to break down.
And our bosses have absolutely no idea what we're up to.
What I'm going to do is get to the gate and then just check the underside of the car.
Yeah.
But to understand why Nina and I have got ourselves into this situation,
Dan's gone to move a fallen tree. Fouling an effort. He might do it. It's a full tree.
Car's fine.
Okay. Really objectively creepy looking forest.
to understand why we're bumping our way through this creepy looking forest and why we've ignored the advice of local people who say you cannot get through on the road this way.
No, well, the local kids said we couldn't get through this way.
Well, they might be right.
They may be right.
To understand why, you have to go back.
And I think at this point we run out of road.
Back to that witness statement from Iris Northam, which was released to us by the inquest into William Tyrrell's disappearance.
I think we have to walk from here.
Okay.
The witness statement we looked at in the last episode, which talks about Frank Abbott and the unsolved murder of Margaret Cox. Because that witness statement also talks about Frank and another unsolved murder, this time of a teenage girl, whose body was discovered near a rough dirt road like this one.
So,
Let's go for a walk. Maybe lock the car.
I'm Dan Box, and from news.com.au, this is Witness William Tyrrell, Episode 15, Sherilee.
All right.
Let's go back to the beginning.
What are we doing?
alright, so we're sitting in the car in Cundletown, which is a village outside Tyrrell on the north coast of New South Wales. And the reason we're sitting here is Iris Northam, who's the witness who gives evidence at the inquest. In her statement, she says that Frank Abbott would go the back road from Cundletown through Brimbin Road, which was partly forest, and make his way to Tyrrell. And he'd also drive a back road from Cedar Party onto Wingham Road, which brings you back to Tyrrell.
If you're struggling to follow, the key thing is Frank Abbott told Iris Northam that he drove the back roads.
He'd go on the back roads to avoid the police.
According to Iris.
According to Iris, but we also know from other evidence at the inquest that Frank often drove cars without a licence and he often drove unregistered cars, so he had a reason to want to avoid the police.
Other people we've spoken to have said the same, that people used to drive the back roads through the forest between Cundletown and Tyrrell. And that might be important.
Because Iris also said that another girl went missing from Tyrrell, and her body was found a few years after she went missing. And Iris says her body was found in Brimbin Road being the back road between Cundletown and Tyrrell. And Iris says she only mentions it because it's one of the roads that Frank used to drive to avoid being caught by the police. Now, Iris doesn't name that girl, but she names her father, and you worked out that girl's a teenager called Cheryl Masters, who's ultimately found on a bush track not far from Brimbin Reserve. So what Iris is doing is she's the one making the connection in the evidence before the inquest between Frank and this girl's disappearance. But when I looked at a map, this back road from Cundletown to Tyrrell, I don't think you can drive a back road from Cundletown to Tyrrell, because on the map it doesn't seem to work.
Yeah.
There's a river in the way and no bridge that I can see. And if it's not possible, then everything Iris says there falls apart. There is no connection that she's made between Frank Abbott and this girl's disappearance, because you can't drive this back road. So there's only one way to test it, which is to go and try and drive the back road.
Yeah, so let's do it.
We're going to do it.
So we set out to test Iris's statement.
Can you go this way?
What am I looking for? Brimbin Road?
Brimbin Road.
Aiming to see if we can find the road Iris describes, which she says Frank Abbott used to drive, and where the body of a 17-year-old girl known as Cheryl Masters was discovered. Cheryl was a carefree, spirited teenager who was crazy about horses and cats and dogs, any animal really. And she was last seen around the year 2000 in Tyrrell, telling friends she was going to hitchhike south. At first, our attempt to find this back road doesn't go well.
Directions. It's off Lansdowne, right?
Yeah, okay.
Start.
In 300 metres, turn left onto Denison
We
Street.
don't need that.
Where are we going?
Brimbin Road.
Brimbin Road.
Oh, we're not too far away. And hilariously, it's the other direction to the one we were driving in.
Okay.
So we turn around, leave Cundletown behind us, and quickly the road empties and starts heading into empty country.
Like, there's no road markings after here.
Where do we
So-
think we're going to turn off?
It could be this one here.
And my observation is this is quite far.
Yeah, you've got to really want to not meet the police.
Yeah. Because this isn't the convenient way to go.
No. So it's empty road, gum trees on one side, fields on either side, horses. Okay, so the next question then is, can you get to Tyrrell?
What street are we looking for? That was Mayuna.
That's the street.
Okay.
Looking at the map, that's the one that I think is most likely a back way to Tyrrell.
Should always just ask the local children.
Actually, that's a really good idea. There's a bunch of kids here mucking around on motorbikes.
Yeah.
Hey guys, is there a back road from here to Tyrrell without having to go down all the way to the main road?
No.
No.
Just on the main road. You have to go along the main road.
You have to go all the way back and then chuck it right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Goes back up.
So none of these turns on the right take you down there?
They're just dead ends, yeah.
So the kids who live here and who muck around on these roads on their dirt bikes, they seem to be saying that Iris must be wrong, because you can't drive a back road from Cundletown to Tyrrell like she says.
Alright, thank you guys.
Nina and I decide to ignore the locals and try to find a back road like the one Iris describes anyway.
I reckon we're on someone's property.
No, No, not on the property. But I don't know what is at the end of the road.
You got the map?
Yeah. So this one, that one there, the kids told us ended in a sewage works.
Yeah. One of them is going to take us to this.
This takes us right to the river.
Does it?
According
Then
to the map.
this is the only one. This is the only way I think you could go from having looked at the
So
maps.
if we go down here and there's an old bridge, it might be usable, it might not.
Then confirmed you could go this way. It's a very inconvenient way to go. But
It's going to be
a way.
inconvenient because I don't know if we can actually turn around once we start driving down here. So let's go.
As you know, this ends badly.
Well, I'm not 100% this car will get to the gate, but it's
What Nina and I do discover is that the kids on bikes were right. You definitely can't drive on a back road between Cundletown and Tarree, as Iris says in her statement to the William Tyrrell inquest. So, Iris's statement is wrong. Except, it turns out that that's not quite what Iris was saying.
Yeah.
But we're just doing a little bit more follow-up.
Oh, I see,
Mainly
yeah.
around some of the questions that we have that came out in the inquest about
Oh,
Frank.
yeah.
We visit Iris and ask her specifically about this back road.
You mentioned in your statement as well some of the back roads
Oh, yes.
that Frank
He-
used to take.
He used to do that because he said they took my licence away because of fines for different things that I hadn't paid. And he said I couldn't go on the highway in case they picked me up. So I used to use the old fire trails.
In Australia, a fire trail is a rough dirt road cleared through the bush for fire crews to use in case of a bushfire.
We were trying to drive them yesterday, but our car almost got broken.
We tell Iris the road that we tried to follow.
No, that's another one.
That's another one.
Yeah, that's out near Cundletown.
talking about another back road from Cundletown to Tarree.
Yeah. Well, this one leads from, you've got,
Iris gets a pen and paper and starts drawing a rough map.
you've got Johns River there. Next down here is Moorland. And from there, he used to go through the forest to Lansdowne.
Suddenly, we realise
From Lansdowne, he used to come into Cundletown.
Nina and I had been on the wrong road.
You turn to Brimban Road, out into the bushes and whatever.
We thought we'd been following the route in Iris's witness statement.
And from there around, it comes out, I think it's Young's Road.
But we were mistaken. We'd been trying to follow Google Maps mostly.
And from there, they used to go along Wingham Road.
And the route Iris is drawing on this piece of paper on her kitchen table
And turn left to go to the 10-pin bowling.
So that would take you
And
down
you-
to Tarree then.
Yeah, it goes to Tyrrell.
It isn't marked on our map.
And the other one goes to Brimban.
I've been looking at a map while you've
Yeah.
been saying that. So I've been looking at this map on my phone. That road you're describing takes you straight through the Yarra forest, the state forest there. But that's where that body you're talking about, Cheverly Masters, that's the rough area
it
where
was
she was
near-
found.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if Frank did used to drive along this road, that would put Frank in the area where Cheryle's body was discovered.
He told us that's the way he went because he didn't have a licence. Didn't want to get picked up.
So, taking the map Iris has now drawn for us, Nina and I decide again to go and try to drive it.
And we'll give you a call if we get stuck.
How's about that?
Do you have a truck you could tow us out with, Iris?
So this is the old Port Macquarie Road, a few kilometres north of Tyrrell, and we're here because, bluntly, we're looking for where the body of Cheryl Lee Masters was found, which is in this forest. And all we really know is from newspaper reports at the time that it's described as a rarely used bush track within a kilometre of where you come off the sealed road.
I mean, she wasn't found for 6 years.
Yeah, it's rarely used.
Yeah.
But the problem with that newspaper report is I don't know if the reporter had actually been here because they got the name of the road wrong. They called it the Old Port Road. And it's actually the Old Port Macquarie Road.
It was written like they saw the crime scene tape.
Huh. Could it be that? That looks like it might once have been a track.
Do you have the description?
Yeah, here. It says the crime scene tape roped off a rarely used bush track leading off the Old Port Road not far from Brimbin Reserve. The track is located less than a kilometre off the tarred Cedar Party Road, which is the road we drove up to get here. It could be. If that is an old bush track, let me have a look.
Yeah.
I get out and walk into the forest, following the bush track, trying to see if it could be the same place described in the old newspaper clippings as where Cheryl Lee's body was discovered. And if you're thinking this all seems quite vague, well, so are we. One thing we are learning is there's so little known about Cheryl Lee's murder. It's almost as if she vanished.
Yeah, that's an old bush track. It doesn't get much traffic and there's no obvious gravesite or anything, but I wouldn't expect one. What there is there's a bunch of stuff that's been fly tipped there, so there's some old sofa cushions maybe, and some kind of household
It did
just
say,
rubbish.
it said in the article that this is a popular dumping area.
Yeah, like people who've been out there and just chucked stuff in the bush. But I guess the significance of it isn't so much that might be the track where Cheryl Lee was found, as we know she was found in this forest, we know she was found on this road, and when we just were talking to Iris then, and the description she gave us of how Frank drove from Cundletown to Tyrrell on back roads, the roads she described, the only way you can get between them are on this old Port Macquarie Road. So if her description of how Frank drove at the time to escape the police is accurate, then he had to come along this road, which is where Cheryl Lee Masters was found. But looking at a map, I don't know if you can actually do that loop through the forest. If you can, it's on this road, which is a dirt track, and the only way to find out if you can or not is to keep going. But I don't know if this car's going to make it.
More concerningly, the phrase she used was roads and fire trails.
Well, it's more concerning if you're the owner of this car.
Which neither of us are. And there's a trail going that way. What's that?
That one's not even on the map.
That one looked like you could have driven on it.
You said this earlier. You're only going to know these roads if you're a local.
Yeah.
So you're only going to find this as a place to dispose of Cheryl Lee's body, and I hate saying it as bluntly as that, and I'm sorry if anyone's listening that did know her. But you're only going to use these places and come to these places if you know of them, and you'd have to be a local to do that. It does make me think one or two things. One is, if Frank Abbott's really driving this road, then why is he so keen to avoid police? Like, getting stopped for driving without a licence. Okay, yeah, you'd get in trouble for that. But driving this far out of your way rather than taking the chance on like the 3 kilometre drive on the main road, feels like he really wanted to avoid police.
Yeah.
But the other thing it makes me think is, Right, say you can't get through on these roads, like Iris said Frank told her he used to do. Say you can't do that. That doesn't mean that Iris is wrong. It might mean that Frank was lying to Iris, that he wanted to give her a different reason for why he was driving on these roads.
Yeah.
Maybe he had a reason he wanted to disguise. Not necessarily that he was involved in Shirley Masters' murder, I'm not suggesting that, but maybe there was something else he did up here that he didn't want Iris to know about.
Yeah.
But the problem is, you can see on the map here.
We're about to hit the end of where Google says this map is.
Yeah, and then there's a river.
And that river's a problem. Because if you can't get through on this road, like Iris says Frank used to in her witness statement, then there is nothing to connect Frank Abbott to the place where Shirley's body was discovered. And if Iris's statement is wrong about that, then maybe she's also wrong about everything else, including the alleged links between Frank Abbott and the unsolved murder of Margaret Cox, which we looked at in the last episode.
All right. Doesn't look like there's any way through.
No, on the map you can't get past the river. But if we're going to find a way, it's going to be just here.
He says as he drives towards a closed gate.
As he says, as there's a massive closed gate. But the thing about that closed gate...
Old Port Macquarie Road is
Old
the
Port
sign.
Macquarie Road goes beyond it,
Yeah.
and it's now a footpath.
Authorised vehicles only.
But how old's the gate? So we're talking 30 years ago?
Yeah.
And if that gate wasn't there 30 years ago when Shirley was murdered, maybe you could keep driving on this road over the river. For now, Nina and I pull up at a little picnic area. It's completely empty. I walk over to a wooden sign where there's a map saying Brimbin Nature Reserve.
Yeah, look at this, look at this, look at this. This is the map on the, I don't know, what is it, Nature Reserve information sign. And it shows, so we're there, see the end of the road at the picnic area. But it shows that old Port Macquarie Road turns into a footpath here, and then it crosses the river. It says it's called the Tommy Owens Crossing. And then the track goes on through the bush here.
And Mrs. Kelly's crossing.
And Miss Kelly's crossing of the river further up. And then if you look here on my phone and you look at that bend in the river again, that takes you back over, it's the Dawson River there, and onto dirt tracks in the forest that lead you back to Brimbin Road. So possibly actually there was a way to drive through here. But it's really out of the way.
So maybe you could once drive the whole way, the way Frank told Iris that he used to.
So it's only now that you can actually put Frank Abbott as having been at the place where Shirley Masters' body was found. So it's only now we've got that connection.
But none of this is proof of anything, far from it. Particularly because when Nina and I do get to the river, there's no way you could drive a car across it.
Yeah. At least in its current state,
No,
you can't drive that.
you can't get across that. There is a bridge, but it's a narrow walking bridge.
Again, 30 years and floods. I don't know what it looks like.
Unless there's any evidence that there was a bigger bridge there once.
We need the library. Where's your local library full of old maps?
Well, it's in Tyrrell.
Yeah. Should I press stop at this stage?
I think so, yeah.
We stop recording and head back to the car, feeling subdued. No bridge, no road, no connection between Frank once driving this route through the forest where Shirley's body was discovered after she was last seen in Taree in the year 2000. Back at our motel, I go to bed and wake up to a text message from Nina. She wants to talk.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I did some reading about town planning. I am not the navigator, as we've established, so I need you to interpret this and tell me if I'm right.
Okay.
So have a look.
So you want...
I want you to look at this email I sent you in the middle of the night
Okay.
about town planning in the early 2000s in Tyrrell.
Okay. All right. So this is the email you sent, which you sent to me at... Oh, in fairness, it was only 11:10 at night.
That's great.
And it's the one titled Brimbin Reserve Development Plan in 2005.
And just
Okay.
click that link.
So just click on that link.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's the Brimbin Nature Reserve Plan of Management from the New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service from May 2005. This is what you were reading in the middle of the night last night.
Sure was.
Okay. Oh, hang on, that's interesting. So there's a map.
There's a map.
There's a map of where we were yesterday, isn't there? The Brimbin picnic area.
Yeah. And then that bit there
Oh.
that says addition to Brimbin Nature Reserve.
Yeah. When on it, it marks the old Port Macquarie Road, which is what we were driving on, as continuing across the river, which is where we stopped yesterday and we couldn't get across. But this shows that there was a road there.
Page 7.
So part 3.5. Two-wheel drive vehicle access to the reserve is available along the old Port Macquarie Road. So that's what we drove along. The road reserve for the old Port Macquarie Road continues east across Tommy Owens Creek towards Lansdowne, though this section is overgrown and not suitable for vehicle access, but it was the route of the old road. So when was Shirley Masters discovered?
Went missing in 2000.
2000.
Yeah. So this document's from 2005 calling that road untrafficable. We don't know if it was untrafficable in 2000.
No, you're right, but it shows that the road continued. You can't do it now, but the Park Service took it over in 1999, just before Shirley Masters goes missing. So yeah, it's quite possible at that point you could still drive that road. I think that's it, Nina.
I think it shows there is an alleged connection between Frank Abbott and the place Shirley was discovered, contained in the witness statement Iris Northam gave to the William Tyrrell inquest. And there is another alleged connection there in Iris's statement, but you have to look closely. Blink and you'd miss it. Because in her witness statement, Iris doesn't actually mention Shirley by name. Instead, she describes a girl who went missing, maybe 5 years after Margaret Cox's murder, and says this girl's body was only found a few years later on Brimbin Road, and that she was about 15 or 16, and her father was a man called Rex Nolan.
The one I was talking to them about was Rex's daughter.
Yeah, Rex Nolan's daughter?
Rex Nolan, yes.
It's Nina who puts the clues together.
That's Cheryl Lee Masters.
Ah, yeah.
Shirley was found in Brimbin Reserve, not Brimbin Road, and she was 17, not 15 or 16, but she was Rex Nolan's daughter.
Yeah, yeah.
When did you start thinking about this other young woman who was found in that bit of bush and maybe in connection to Frank?
Well, only that reason, because he used to go out around that way. And with the connection that he knew Rex and Karen.
But that Frank knew Rex, Shirley's father, and Karen, Shirley's stepmother.
And they worked at the markets.
This is new. It's not in Iris's witness statement.
The only connection that could be, Frank worked at the markets.
Which markets are these?
Johns River.
Johns River is the tiny town where Frank once lived in the years before Shirley went missing. The town has a market held on the second Saturday of each month at the Johns River Community Hall, which is opposite the house where Frank was living.
He helped at the markets out there where Rex and Karen used to sell stuff. He used to go to the markets and he'd help them set up things and do little odd jobs for them there.
So he knew Shirley's parents?
Yeah, he knew them.
And did you ever see them together?
No.
How do you know the connection?
No, I only know that Frank lived opposite the hall.
Yeah.
Where they had the markets.
Yeah.
Frank used to help there, just about every month it was.
Okay. Other people from Johns River tell us the same thing. Frank was always at the markets, where Shirley's family were regulars. That alone proves nothing. But here's what bothers me about it. We found this connection, me and Nina, not the police. And it didn't take us long to do it. The clues were right there in the statement Iris gave the inquest into William Tyrrell's disappearance, which was signed by a police detective. And Iris has previously told us this detective promised to pass the information on to the unsolved homicide team for them to follow up. But Iris says she never heard back. We asked the New South Wales Police what happened. Was this information ever passed on? But they declined to answer. So we find our own detective.
Are we still recording?
Yeah.
With the red light?
Yeah.
Great. Imagine if we weren't.
Our colleague Gary Jubelin, who used to be the lead detective on the investigation into William's disappearance.
I left the investigation at the time when there was certain lines of inquiry that had to look at Frank Abbott.
Gary says he can't answer for what the police did after he left the investigation.
And then, to my surprise, Frank Abbott became the only suspect in the William Tyrrell matter.
Okay, Gary's making a point here. Frank was not the only suspect in the William Tyrrell investigation, but he was a very prominent person of interest that the police were clearly focused on at that point. But, given how much attention Frank was getting,
you'd be doing a deep dive into him, and this type of stuff, based on that statement, you'd want to have a look at that, because I would, what's written in the statement from Iris Northam, I would imagine that when you're sitting there taking the statement, she's adding some other bits and pieces to it.
When we sat down with her, we learned more than was in her statement.
Yeah, if you're asking me how I would approach it, if we're looking at Frank Abbott, which once I'm taken off the investigation, if it was being run the way an investigation should be run, there'd be briefings. And that certainly would be brought to the attention of the person running the investigation. She said this, said that. Okay, we've got to have a look at that. How do we have a look at that? We look at the cases. We get that information in, and is Frank Abbott involved in that? I want to preface that with, it's not going to solve the William Tyrrell matter. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's involved in William Tyrrell, but you'd be looking as deep as you can. You want as much information. So I don't want to be critical of it because I just don't know the full circumstances. I'm just looking at it from an investigative point of view. I think I'm informed enough, having led the investigation for 4 years, know how we had to go through persons of interest, and you had to look at everything about the person of interest. If someone's presented a statement from sitting in a briefing room and being told this and told that, okay, well, we've got to have a look at this, we've got to have a look at that. Does it solve the William Tyrrell matter? Perhaps not, but if we're looking at a person of interest, you've got to look at them completely. So
you would have looked at these two cases?
Yeah.
Margaret Cox and Shirley Masters?
Yeah. And knowing the way that the investigation was run, if you're saying someone's a person of interest, you look at absolutely everything about that person. And when you're looking at a murder investigation, which William Tyrrell is, there's enough there in the way that you've relayed the information, what you've provided to me, to think, yeah, it's worth looking at. Coming back to Cheryl Lee Masters, yeah, if you knew her father was associated with the markets around there, yeah, you'd have a look. And you'd do it as a matter of course. I would anyway.
We suspect the New South Wales Police have not looked closely enough at the information about Shirley, contained in Iris Northam's statement. We suspect this because Nina tracks down Sheryl brother, Tony Masters, and he says he hasn't heard anything from the police in years.
Sheryl was a very carefree, spirited, very outgoing person. She had very, itchy feet. She never could seem to stay in one place for too long. She was a very kind person.
Tony has a kind face and a nervous energy. Sitting on a park bench near his home in northwest Sydney, he tells Nina how his sister Sheryl grew up tough.
With her slow development, she was 17, but probably in the mind of a 13 or 14-year-old child. So that's where she was at.
Sheryl lived in and out of foster care, always seeming to fall through the gaps in the system.
You learn not to trust. If we ever saw the police, we'd run. So I feel like the authorities weren't people that she could turn to and trust. So she really had no one. She had herself. And that, I think, kind of helped a lot to her demise.
While still only in her mid-teens, Sheryl was living on her own in an apartment, but under the watch of the state government Department of Community Services, which has since changed its name, but is the same department that was later responsible for looking after 3-year-old William Tyrrell, who also disappeared.
I just feel like every possible system really let her down, also let the whole family down.
It's easy to understand why Tony's family might feel this way. He says Sheryl was last seen in the year 2000 when she told some friends in Tyrrell she was going to hitchhike south.
It was pretty much her main mode of transportation. I don't think she really had money to pay for transport, so she just used to hitchhike.
Tony first heard his sister was missing in a phone call.
I got a phone call from the police saying, she's a missing person.
Did the police seem concerned?
Not overly. It was more of I felt like the calls were just a duty, for them, a responsibility. We have to notify somebody.
What were they doing that you're aware of to find her?
Not much. I don't even think they bothered to place the mannequin they had with a previous lady in at the shopping centre near where I worked, put a mannequin that was wearing the same clothes as a young lady that disappeared.
If that sounds odd, that Tony would talk about the police not putting a mannequin of his sister in the shopping centre after she went missing, there's a reason. 4 years before Sheryl was last seen in Tyrrell, another woman went missing from the same small city. That was Margaret Cox, who we talked about in the last episode. And then the police put a mannequin of Margaret, dressed in the clothes she'd been wearing, in the local shopping centre, hoping it would remind someone that they'd seen her on that day.
I used to work at Kmart in Tyrrell, and I was about 15. I just used to walk past the mannequin every day, going into work.
Sheryl would also have seen that mannequin, according to Tony.
Yeah, I actually think one time I even sat down near that mannequin.
So when Sheryl went missing, Tony wondered, where's her mannequin? Were the police just not so interested in his sister? Nina and I have spoken to the cop who oversaw the detectives working in Tyrrell in 2000. He says he does not remember Sheryl's disappearance being reported. And 6 years passed. In 2006, a group of soldiers were on an exercise in the state forest just north of Tyrrell when they discovered human remains, and the police got back in touch with Tony.
They told me that they had actually found some remains and they wanted DNA testing.
It was 2 more years, 2008, before the DNA tests finally identified the body as Sheryl. Finally, it seemed the police were doing something.
They said that there was a special task force that had been set up to investigate Sheryl's murder. I think I met them maybe twice over the whole duration, But I invited them to Shirley's memorial, but they didn't come. I spoke with them once after that, and they just said that it was still an ongoing investigation and therefore they can't talk about anything. And that was pretty much... I made numerous phone calls to them. It always took forever to get phone calls returned, so they couldn't tell us really anything at all, any possible leads or anything. They couldn't tell us anyone's name, and they couldn't tell us anything at all. So, we really didn't get anything from them.
Unbelievably, Tony says his family were never even told the results of the autopsy saying how Shirley died.
There was literally nothing explained. The extent of what we knew was it was a shallow grave.
A shallow grave. Tony says he almost hoped his sister had died in an accident.
Maybe she got hit by a car or something while hitchhiking, because, sometimes it's hard to see people on the side of highways if it's raining and stuff.
That wouldn't be so bad, he says. At least that way Shirley might not have suffered.
And when we questioned the police, they're like, we can't tell you anything. But they said that it definitely was a homicide. She had actually been murdered.
In the end, it was the funeral director, not the police detectives, who explained that Shirley had suffered a massive head injury.
She showed us the back of Shirley's skull and said that her professional opinion was that Shirley had actually taken something to the back of her head, which would have been enough to kill her.
I can't imagine how difficult that must have all been to go through.
I think I just felt really sorry for her.
Then things got worse. Shirley's family were told her remains were missing.
How long were they missing for?
Probably a couple of years. It took them a while to get it back to us.
Years?
Yeah, it was a long time.
How do you misplace something that important?
I think she was just... I think because they have a whole lot of unsolved crimes and just evidence in storage, and they maybe mislabeled it, or the box was behind another box, or maybe they're short on staff that really didn't want to take the time to look. We were never really given a reason why, just that she was misplaced. So, and they would get her to us as soon as they could.
It wasn't soon enough, though. Shirley's father, Rex Nolan, died before his daughter's remains were returned to the family.
So he actually never got to bury her.
With her murder still unsolved, the family held a memorial service.
And the police didn't come to it, even though they were invited, and it was a big turnout. A lot of people from Tyrrell were there. We thought they could come and maybe, hear some stories about her. They might hear something that matches up with something they already had, I thought, but they didn't bother coming. And we didn't really hear much from them over that whole period.
By this time, there had been an inquest, so a formal investigation into how Shirley died. But Tony says his family were not invited to take part, and the inquest findings are easily the most upsetting of any that I've seen in almost 20 years of reporting on crime.
Are you okay if I read this loud?
Of course.
Yeah. So it says, inquest into the death of Cheryl Lee Masters, I make the following finding. I find that the deceased Cheryl Lee Master, they spelled her name wrong, between October 1995 and October 2005 at an unknown place in the state of New South Wales, died of an undeterminable cause in circumstances that I've also not been able to determine.
Yeah, that pretty much sounds like the whole, we don't really know, and that they, one, would misspell her name, and in fact, legally her name isn't Masters, it's actually Nolan, and my father was really upset because her name was never legally changed to Masters, and on her gravestone it's hyphenated. We actually have Masters Nolan, so the fact that they'd never even used her actual legal name
in the coronial finding.
In the coronial finding, and there was no reference to it, but also to the fact that the dates were so broad, they didn't even mention when she was actually discovered.
Yeah, because I noticed that the earliest date there is 1995. She was definitely seen alive post 1995, right?
Yeah, she was definitely seen alive. I had seen her in 98, 99, and she'd been out to Tamworth to see our mum and our little sisters out there, and she had actually been dating a guy, his name was Patrick, so she had actually been seen. And I just don't think the police had bothered to try to track any of these people down, interview any of these people, and if they did, they made no reference of it to me at all. So,
Were you able to submit anything for the inquest?
I don't believe I was actually asked to submit anything for the inquest. Didn't think that was something you could do. So, no, I don't think I did.
Families can very much provide information to an inquest. And most inquests I've seen, the grieving family is right at the heart of the process. The fact Tony wasn't told that his family could be appalls me. And then when we asked the coroner's court to see the records from the inquest into Sherilee's death, we were told, quote, "Archives have not had any luck finding this file after numerous searches," meaning they can't find the file of Sherilee's inquest. They've lost it, after somehow also misplacing Sherilee's body. How does that happen with a murder victim? Who leaves these gaps in the system?
Yeah, it just still baffled me that the police didn't treat it a little bit more with more urgency in case the killer was still out there, still killing people.
Tony says he doesn't know who, if anyone, is now responsible for catching his sister's killer.
No, just an unsolved murder mystery, just like so many other cases. Like, there's a lot, and I just feel like Sherilee's now just another number, on someone's desk or locked away in a room that nobody bothers to go into anymore.
Nina asks if anyone from the police has recently contacted Tony.
No, I haven't heard from the police for decades now.
Meaning it is Nina who first tells Tony about Iris Northam's evidence to the William Tyrrell inquest, which mentions his sister's disappearance.
Okay, so this is the statement of a woman named Iris Northam that she made to the William Tyrrell inquest about a person of interest called Frank Abbott.
Nina shows Tony the part of Iris's statement that talks about his dad, Rex,
So I'll show you where you can go from. So
and tells him what Iris told us about Rex and Frank both working at the Johns River markets.
Yeah, so Rex and Karen, they used to go to all the markets, Old Bar, Tari, definitely in Johns River was one of the areas that they would go to.
Would Sherilee have been to those markets with them?
Sherilee may have, but I can't say definitely.
We don't know exactly where Sherilee was living at the time, whether she even was living with Rex or Karen, so it's hard to know how much time they spent together. But even if there's a possibility, Tony thinks the police should have told him about Iris Northam's evidence.
I feel a bit annoyed, I think. I feel, annoyed that people knew this. I feel a bit, disappointed that people have actually given information to the police and they haven't passed that along.
So that's now 3 unsolved murders. Helen Harrison, where Frank Abbott was found not guilty, Margaret Cox, who we talked about in the last episode, and Sherilee. In all 3 cases, new evidence has come to light at the inquest into William Tyrrell's disappearance. But the victims' families and the potential witnesses that we've spoken to, none of them have been contacted by the New South Wales police.
You think you would at least inquire and ask around and do a little bit of digging? I kind of feel like when people go missing, too many people are just, a picture on the side of a milk carton. And that's so detached. But when you actually start thinking of them, this is actually somebody that, used to play hopscotch and skip and liked playing with dolls and loved animals. And if people actually got to see that this was a person and not just, some, kind of wild teenager that deserved what she got, it'd be different. Because really, People don't deserve it.
Nobody deserves what happened to Tony's sister, Sherilee, who was lost and whose murderer has not been brought to justice. But as Nina and I discover,
All right, rolling.
there are other unsolved murders of women and children up here on the New South Wales north coast. In fact, there are dozens of them. So, I've taken pages out of a road atlas and stuck them on the wall. So we've got a map of the whole north coast of New South Wales all the way up to the Queensland border. The map reaches almost floor to ceiling. And it looks like a long way, but it's a day's drive really, isn't it? It's a long day's drive. But what I want to do is try to get a sense of the number of unsolved murders and missing people on this one stretch of coast. So we've got a list, and I've got some sticky labels, and I thought we'd literally just stick an arrow on the map for each of these unsolved murders or missing persons.
Okay.
All right? So Tyrrell Cox disappears from Grafton.
1977.
1977. Next up, Joy Hodkins and Annie Tominac. They either go missing or their bodies are found in Mayfield.
You want 2 or 1 sticker?
2. It takes Nina and I an hour to work through the list of missing and unsolved murder victims. I've actually noticed that both our houses are on here. So there's you at the bottom and there's me just there. We got the list of names from questions and answers in the New South Wales State Parliament. Same year, 1978, Leanne Goodall, last seen outside the Star Hotel in Newcastle. And this information comes from the police themselves. 1979, Robin Hickey disappears from Belmont. The same year, Amanda Robinson disappears from Swansea. Annika Adriansen and Alan Fox. Caroline Dow, Kingscliff.
Are we still in the 70s?
We're still in the same year. Through the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s and 2010s, the names just keep on coming. Elfriede Zierek,
Amanda Zollis,
Hazel Vidler, Elizabeth Dixon, Susan Mary Smith. And slowly, we start noticing patterns. There's 5 in a group just around Newcastle and South. Mm-hmm. Then we've actually got 3 in Bowraville. Mm-hmm. So Evelyn Greenup, Colleen Walker-Craig and Clinton Speedy Durow.
In 1990s, yeah?
1990 and 1991, but over 6 months. And that we know almost certainly is a serial killer. Yeah.
All right.
And then we've got another for 1990, Veronica Rigney, Hazel Christian, 1991. 1992, Ada Collins in Swansea, so that's just outside Newcastle again. God, there's so many of them in Newcastle.
It's actually getting hard to read the map with all the
so many
stickers.
arrows
Yeah.
We're not saying Frank Abbott has any link to any of these cases.
Some of these in the 90s are the ones that they were looking at for the granny killer.
As in they thought they were all possible victims of another known serial killer.
Yeah.
In fact, we're saying there is no link between Frank and almost all of them. Bronwyn Winfield, Alison Newstead and Melissa Astill. It's just there are so many unsolved cases. 1994, Gordana Katevsky disappears from Charlestown. Melissa Hunt, Janelle Megan Pitt, Margaret Howlett, Angela Foley, Inika Hinckley, Margaret Cox, murdered in Taree. And when you see them all together on the wall in front of you, it's a lot to get your head round. Lee Ellen Stace, murdered in Yamba. Marion Barter, Lois Roberts.
Bernadette Donaldson, Elizabeth Wright, Lisa Varignola from Hexham.
The police have looked at connections between some of these unsolved cases. In 1998, a task force was set up to look at potential links between 10 missing people and the backpacker killer, Ivan Milat.
Just flag, Milat's arrested here.
1994.
Yeah,
But the murders continue.
yeah.
Other police investigations also looked for links between some of the cases. And there was a quote in one of the papers: "We've had one young woman murdered at a truck stop barely an hour away, so it would be stupid to dismiss the possibility the same person could have struck again," said the lead detective. "Both women were young, blonde and hitchhiking alone. Both disappear from busy roads, and there's a possible link to the Pacific Highway." And then there's Task Force Metz, which is a police investigation looking at the disappearance and murder of Lois Roberts. But it's reported as also looking at the deaths of Lee Ellen Stace, Inika Hinckley and Margaret Cox. But few of these police investigations are successful, and the names just keep on coming. Susan Kay and Joanne Tetterin, and then Celeste Gilbert and Shirley Masters, Taya Colwell, Rhonda Bickley, Lucy MacDonald, Margaret Gall. 2003, Rose Howell disappears from Bellingen. 2004, Kylie Ann Schaffer disappears. 2005, Rosalind Ray, Simone Strobel, Amanda Odell, murdered in Kempsey. Danica Dixon, Lismore. Third in Lismore. 2008, Stacey McMore. 2009, Jasmine Morris disappears from Grafton. And the last one on this list is Ellen Wilson, who disappears from Ballina in 2015. Got it. So that's it. What do you think?
It's shocking to look at, even more so when I remember that these aren't just the list of murders that have happened. These are just the unsolved murders.
Yeah. So why are all these cases unsolved? Nina and I go back and read through some of the inquest findings that have looked at some of these cases, and they are utterly damning of the initial police investigations. One coroner talks about major failure. Another describes a violent death wrongly written off by police as an accident. They talk about people who are reported missing, who are just not properly investigated, evidence that is lost, witnesses who are not taken seriously. And by the time other detectives do go back and pick up some of these cases, years have passed. Those witnesses have grown old or died, and more records have gone missing. Meaning these missing or murdered people like Cheryl Lee keep falling through the gaps.
All right. It's almost 1 a.m. and I am really, really tired.
Both Nina and I are troubled by what we've discovered.
I'd like to be asleep, but my head is spinning, trying to sort of digest all of the information that we got today. And there's just one point that's kind of stuck out to me that I just want to document, so I'm documenting it here. Okay, so we know that there are a lot of unsolved murders on the North Coast, and there's been a lot of talk of them being linked, or, you know, serial killers, and there's been talk of Milat, there's been talk of other serial killers that could have operated in the area, and there's been task forces during that time that have looked at various links, and we know that, but two of those women went missing near Tyrrell. 1996, Margaret is murdered. 4 years after that, Cheryl Lee Masters goes missing those women were found with head injuries. And all this rambling is just for me to say, if you're looking at all these unsolved cases and you're the police and you're looking at linking cases and potential links, why has no task force publicly looked at those cases? Okay, I'm going to bed. Now I've got that out of my system. Good night.
The next morning, Nina and I get ready to leave the North Coast.
This might be our last visit to Kendal. You know, I've been coming here for 10 years.
But before we do leave, there's one last place we both want to go to.
And there's the house.
The house where all this started, where 3-year-old William Tyrrell is last known to have been alive because of a photograph taken at 9:37 a.m. on the 12th of September 2014.
So, we're sitting outside the house where William Tyrrell was reported missing. There's a grey sky, crowded trees on either side, the same silence you always hear on this road. There's nobody moving, no noise. And in the past 10 years, more than 10 years now, it's like everything has changed and nothing has changed. The people who live in this house weren't the people who lived in that house then. Plenty of people in this street have gone, some of them because of what happened. And yet, the street is almost identical to the first time I came here, just after William was reported missing. God, it feels quite oppressive being here.
I was just looking at you and looking at how much more tired you are.
More tired than...
the last time we were here.
Is it that obvious? Yeah, I do feel tired. And I feel that there's too much of this in my head now. Like last night as I went to sleep, it's at the point I say, don't think about William Tyrrell and don't think about Frank Abbott. And I'm not even close to the centre of this. I'm not one of those people actually directly affected by it. But I do feel tired. But there is one thing which we haven't done, one place we haven't been, and which we know that the police haven't searched. And that's the bird tree, where we've been told that William's body was buried. But look, we've got no reason to think it's true. It's a second-hand account that Frank Abbott's brother told someone, and when we spoke to that person, they said they didn't remember. But still, it is the one place we haven't been. And if we're going to look for answers to what happened, I think we do have to go there. So I think we should go. Right. So if we start driving here, from outside the house where William was reported missing, you drive down Benneroon Drive, and here at the bottom you've got a choice of left or right, and left takes you to Kendal, which is the town. But if you want to get away, you choose right, which takes you here. This is Batar Creek Road. Single lane, no road, no street lights. Feels like you're driving deep into the forest. And here's the crossroads where the police most recently were alleging that William's foster mother disposed of his body, despite the fact there's no evidence she even went there that morning. And when they searched it, they found nothing. And the police haven't been back since that search, which was what now, 4 years? Country opens up a little, and there's horses, a couple of really isolated buildings. So far there's been 2 turnings, both of them onto very small roads.
Haven't seen any other cars.
Haven't seen any people. But here we turn off the bitumen onto, I mean, there's kind of a road. Now it's very narrow, and now we're on dirt. So again, we're on the back roads. If you thought it was isolated before, now the forest is really crowding in, reaching into the road on either side, and the trees are hanging right over the road, so it's dark. There's no turning round on the road, there's no going back.
Yeah, I had the same feeling when we were driving Brimban Road.
That was where Cheryl Masters was found, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And again, on the road out to where Margaret Cox's clothes were found, there's these thin dirt roads out where no one's looking. Up until this point we've been following Google Maps, but that's now lost us. There's just no reception here. There's a couple of really small dirt tracks leading off this dirt track. It's a sign for the bird tree, 4 kilometres. I love the fact I'm indicating, like there's anyone to see it. And we're getting higher now. Just through the few breaks in the trees, you can see we've come right almost to the top of this. Well, I guess it's a mountain, it's Middle Brother Mountain. Okay. So now, do we go here?
Looks like it, I think.
All up, it takes less than 20 minutes to drive from the house where William was reported missing to the bird tree.
I feel actually like my skin's crawling. I think it's the forest.
It's so dense.
And dark.
The ground cover is so thick.
I can remember flying in the first time I came up here for this and looking out of the plane and looking down at the dark forest and these pools of black water and just thinking, if William is lost in there, it's an almost... No, it's not impossible. Like, he has to be found, and we do have to find answers. So come on. Let's go and find the bird tree. There's a picnic table and a map.
Look at that tree.
That might be the bird tree. See, people have walked around the outside of it. There's like a faint path walking around it. It must be 4-5 metres across at the base. It's enormous. The bush is so thick. If you're walking out onto it, you're going to be walking on a dense mass of rotting leaves and branches and bark. You'd only have to force your way out into that for 10, 15 metres, and anything you left there will not be found unless the police would have come out in force on the kind of scale we've seen them do before more than once in William's case, and just strip everything away. So they can do it. Nina and I start walking out into the forest.
I reckon that way.
Even though I don't think we'll find anything.
Ground is just thick with wet leaves.
And I don't think there's even anything to be found here. But having come this far, imagine if we didn't at least try. We kind of have to. Nina and I get separated in the forest, lost in our own thoughts, and it takes a while before we find each other. How you doing?
Yeah.
I went out and I found a footpath that isn't marked on the maps, and I followed it, and it takes you to another one of these huge blackbutt trees, but this one, the trunk's been hollowed out at the bottom, and you can go inside, and inside there's this great pile of earth, almost like it's been dug up, and you can see termites are building spires up out of it. And then the path goes on. And it turns out this forest is riddled with them. Completely unmarked footpaths. And I've followed 2 now, and I've no idea where they take you. But the one thing I do know is that if you wanted to hide something, I can think of no better place. I try showing Nina where I was looking in the forest. So that footpath isn't marked on the maps, but that's not the one I ended up on. We stop at another of those giant trees. This tree is so big. And inside the trunk it's been burnt out, maybe by a bushfire, but it's so big I can stand inside it. And you could fit, what, 15 people in here? And I look up and I cannot see the top. It's just blackness. I think I actually feel sick.
Yeah.
I think we came out, when we started this, we were looking at the investigation into a missing child, and we found child abuse and unsolved murders and broken lives and broken families. And I think I don't have, I think we're all human. I don't think we have the ability to deal with this much horror. But that's what the disappearance of William Tyrrell has led to, is that horror, particularly for those people who knew him and loved him and now live with it. We've been looking for answers since the inquest finished, and we've only got questions. Just with Frank Abbott, so much time has passed, and the people with the answers to those questions, so many of them are dead. There's Frank's mum and his dad and his brother Ted, all of them alibi witnesses when he was put on trial for the murder of Helen Harrison. There's Frank's brother Bluey, who is the person who
apparently said that William was here near the bird tree. There's the prison informant who gave evidence against Frank at his trial. All dead. There's Noel, Sonta and Dooley, Iris's husband, who they're still with us, but they're old and they're no longer able to give evidence. And we know that the police failed to follow up on two of those witnesses, Frank's wife's sister and her cousin, back in the 70s when they came forward. But the bigger question, and the question for right now, is whether the police have followed up the evidence about Frank that has come up at the William Tyrrell inquest. And from what we've seen, they haven't. When we looked at all those unsolved murders up the North Coast, I asked the police about them, and they sent us a written statement that says there is no evidence to indicate a common offender was responsible for the disappearances. So they're saying there's no serial killer. And then I thought about that, and I thought, actually that's not entirely true, because I know the police have argued in court, because I was there, that 3 of those unsolved murders were committed by one offender, a serial killer. And I know from the inquest that the police do suspect that some of those murders were committed by Ivan Milat, another serial killer. And we know the police also suspect some of those murders may have been committed by a third convicted serial killer, the granny killer. So if the police do accept that there may be 3 serial killers who've committed some of these dozens of unsolved murders, then the question is, will the police accept that there may be another killer out there who's not been convicted? Will the police investigate? And if not, all of these murdered women and children, all of those families, like William, risk being forgotten. And I feel pretty sick at that thought. How do you feel?
I feel like I might cry.
Don't cry. Hey, you know what? You couldn't have done any more. You've done so much. More than we ever set out to do. And more than I ever expected you to do. And for a long time, more than I knew you were doing. You couldn't have done any more. And now the rain comes. Well, we should go. Don't cry. There is a postscript to this episode. Back at the start of this series, I talked about the sheer number of lives that have been caught up and damaged by the police investigation into William Tyrrell's disappearance. Talking about family members and witnesses, those wrongly put under suspicion and arrested, even charged, and then their families. I'm tempted to add to that number the families of Helen Harrison, Margaret Cox and Shirley Masters, who now have to come to terms with the fact that the police and the inquest into William's disappearance received new alleged information about their deaths and did not even contact either the witnesses or these women's families. After we spoke to one of those relatives, Sherile's brother, Tony Masters, he called police, asking who's now handling his sister's murder and if he could have an update. That was more than 2 months ago, and as of this morning, Tony has never heard back. But it doesn't have to end there. After 10 years in which the New South Wales Police Force has failed to find William Tyrrell, this may be a part of his legacy. That this alleged evidence has been uncovered, and through this podcast, it has been made public. It's now up to the police if and how they decide to act. A lot of different people have been involved in making this series. Among them, the executive producer is Nina Young, the sound design was by Tiffany Dimmack, the producers have been Emily Pidgeon, Nicholas Adams Jasbar, Phoebe Zakowski-Wallace and Tabby Wilson. Research by Aidan Patrick, original music by Rory O'Connor. Our lawyer is Stephen Coombs. The editor at news.com.au is Kerry Warren. I'm Dan Box.